Wife cheats on husband, lives to regret it. Part 1. The Betrayal. The Boston winter was particularly harsh that year, with snow piling high against our brownstones windows and temperatures dropping to record lows. But the coldness outside was nothing compared to what had grown between Sarah and me. 15 years of marriage, and somehow we'd become strangers living under the same roof. I'd been working 70-hour weeks at the law firm, pushing for that partnership that always seemed just beyond reach. Sarah had thrown herself into her interior design business, and somewhere along the way, we stopped seeing each other, even when we were in the same room. "James, I'll be late tonight. Client meeting in Cambridge." That's what she said as she left that morning, her perfume lingering in the air long after she'd gone. It wasn't the first late-night client meeting she'd had in the past few months. There had been many. I nodded, barely looking up from my laptop. Don't forget, Emma has her recital tomorrow. Emma, our 12-year-old daughter, was the one bright spot that kept our home from complete emotional bankruptcy. She had Sarah's amber eyes and my stubborn chin, and a talent for the piano that amazed us both. That evening, I decided to surprise Sarah by showing up at her office. Maybe we could grab dinner, talk about something other than schedules and bills. It had been months since we'd had a real conversation. Her office was dark when I arrived. The receptionist looked surprised to see me. "Mr. Reynolds, Sarah left hours ago. Said she was meeting a client at the Charles Hotel." Something in her expression made my stomach tighten. I thanked her and left, telling myself there was a reasonable explanation. I didn't plan to go to the hotel. That would show a lack of trust. But my car seemed to drive itself there anyway. I spotted her immediately in the hotel bar, but she wasn't with a client. She was with David Miller, my colleague from the firm. Their hands were intertwined on the table, her wedding ring catching the light as she leaned in to laugh at something he said. When he kissed her, she didn't pull away. My world collapsed in that moment. I felt physically ill, watching them through the glass partition of the bar. 15 years of memories flashed through my mind. Our wedding day, Emma's birth, building our home together, all now tainted by this betrayal. I didn't confront them. I simply turned around and drove home, my mind racing with what to do next. Part 2. The Fallout. When Sarah came home that night, I was sitting in the dark living room. One look at my face and she knew something was wrong. "James? Why are you sitting in the dark? How long has it been going on?" My voice sounded strange even to myself. Hollow. The color drained from her face. "What are you talking about?" "You and David. I saw you tonight at the Charles." She didn't deny it. That's what hurt the most. There was no desperate attempt to explain it away or claim I'd misunderstood what I saw. 6 months, she finally said, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, James. I never meant for this to happen." "Does anyone at the firm know?" It was an absurd question to prioritize, but somehow my professional reputation seemed like the only thing I could still control. "No, we've been careful." Her voice broke. "James, we've been like roommates for years. When was the last time you really saw me? Really talked to me? David? He makes me feel visible again." Her words stung because there was truth in them. I had been absent, buried in work, convinced I was doing the right thing by providing for my family while neglecting the actual relationships within it. That night, I slept in the guest room. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 7 years and took Emma to school. "Is everything okay, Dad?" she asked, too perceptive for her 12 years. "Everything will be fine, sweetheart," I lied, forcing a smile. Over the next few weeks, our home became a minefield of tension and unsaid words. Sarah ended things with David, she said, but the damage was done. Trust, once broken, is like a shattered mirror. You can put the pieces back together, but you'll always see the cracks. I moved into an apartment downtown. We told Emma we needed some time apart to figure things out. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded bravely, a child forced to understand adult failings. Part 3. The Healing Journey. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly civil. We both wanted to spare Emma as much pain as possible. Sarah got the house. I kept my retirement accounts. We agreed on joint custody, with Emma spending weekdays with Sarah and weekends with me. Those first few months alone were the hardest of my life. My apartment felt sterile and empty. Weekends with Emma were precious but tinged with sadness when Sunday evening came and she had to leave. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Chen, who helped me see my part in the collapse of our marriage. "You're focusing all your anger on the affair," she said during one session. "But your marriage was in trouble long before that." "Are you saying I deserve to be cheated on?" I asked defensively. "No, infidelity is a choice Sarah made, but healing means understanding the full picture of what went wrong, including your role in it." Slowly, painfully, I began to see how I'd checked out of my marriage years ago, how I'd prioritized work over connection, achievement over presence. It didn't excuse Sarah's betrayal, but it helped me understand the void she'd tried to fill. Meanwhile, I was adjusting to single life. I joined a community basketball league, something I'd loved in college but had abandoned for my career. I started cooking for myself, experimenting with recipes I found online. I even adopted a dog, a goofy golden retriever named Max, who greeted me with unrestrained joy every day when I came home. 6 months after moving out, I ran into Sarah at Emma's piano recital. She looked different, thinner, more fragile somehow. "You look well," she said, her eyes taking in my more relaxed appearance. "Thanks. Basketball twice a week is working wonders," I replied awkwardly. We sat together for Emma's sake, clapping loudly when she finished her piece. Afterward, as we waited for Emma to gather her things, Sarah turned to me. "I've been seeing someone too. A therapist, I mean," she clarified quickly. "It's helping me understand why I made the choices I did." I nodded, surprised at the lack of pain her words caused. "That's good." "James, I know it doesn't change anything, but I am truly sorry. The affair, it was the biggest mistake of my life." There was a time when hearing those words would have felt vindicating. Now they just felt sad. "We both made mistakes," I said quietly. Different ones, but still. Part 4. Unexpected turns. Life settled into a new normal. At work, I finally had the conversation I'd been avoiding for years. I didn't want the partnership track. I wanted balance. Surprisingly, the firm was accommodating, offering me a senior counsel position with more reasonable hours. I started dating again, cautiously. There was Claire, a pediatrician I met at a friend's dinner party, and Melissa, who taught at Emma's school. Nice women, but something was missing. A year after our separation, I got a call from Sarah late one night. "James, I'm at the hospital. It's my mom. She had a stroke." Barbara had always been more like a mother to me than my own. Without hesitation, I said, "I'm on my way." The next few weeks were a blur of hospital visits, doctor's consultations, and figuring out long-term care options. Sarah and I fell into a rhythm of cooperation we hadn't had even when our marriage was at its best. We were united in our concern for Barbara and in shielding Emma from too much worry. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the hospital, Sarah and I found ourselves at a diner across the street, too exhausted to do anything but pick at greasy food. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "You didn't have to step up like this, after everything, ... "Barbara's family," I said simply. "And we're still family too in some way. Different than before, but still." She looked at me for a long moment. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about what happened with us. The affair was completely my fault. A terrible, selfish choice. But the distance between us, that was building for years." "Yeah, my therapist helped me see that too," I admitted. "I was physically present but emotionally checked out for a long time." "Do you think we could have saved it if we'd seen what was happening sooner?" I considered the question carefully. "Maybe, but we'd have had to both want to, and both know how. I don't think either of us did." In that moment, sitting across from each other in a fluorescent-lit diner, there was an honesty between us that had been missing for years. Part 5. Redemption. Barbara recovered slowly but steadily. During her rehabilitation, Sarah and I continued our unexpected cooperation, creating a schedule to ensure someone was always there for her and for Emma. One day, as we were leaving the rehabilitation center, Sarah asked if I wanted to grab coffee. We ended up walking along the Charles River, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Emma's emerging teenage attitude, my new role at work, her decision to scale back her business and focus on fewer, more meaningful projects. These coffee walks became a regular thing. Not dates, just two people who once meant everything to each other finding a new way to connect. 6 months later, Emma asked if she could bring Max to live at the house during the week. "I miss him when I'm not at Dad's," she explained. "And Mom seems lonely since Grandma moved to the assisted living facility." Sarah agreed, surprisingly. The next weekend, when I dropped Emma and Max off, Sarah invited me in for dinner. Just as a thank you for everything this past year. Dinner led to another and another. We were careful, both terrified of rushing into something that might hurt Emma or ourselves. But slowly, cautiously, we found ourselves rebuilding. Not the same relationship we had before, but something new, more honest, more present. 2 years after I moved out, Sarah asked me a question that took my breath away. "Do you think you could ever forgive me completely?" We were sitting on the porch swing at the house, watching Max chase squirrels in the yard. "I already have," I realized as I said it. "The anger, it's gone. Has been for a while." "And do you think, is there any chance we could try again?" "Not like before, something new." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just the woman who had betrayed me, but the young woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago, the mother of my child, the partner who had stood beside me through my father's death and my career struggles. "I'd like that," I said softly, "but we'd have to do it differently. More honest, more present." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'd like that too." When we told Emma we were dating again, her reaction was typically teenage. "Duh, I've known for like months. You guys are so obvious." It wasn't easy. We still had moments of doubt, old wounds that would flare up unexpectedly. We committed to couples therapy, both determined not to repeat the same patterns. We set up weekly date nights and daily check-ins, prioritizing our connection in a way we never had before. 6 months after we started dating, I moved back into the house. Not into our old bedroom, but into the guest room. We were taking things slowly, rebuilding trust day by day. The night I finally moved back into our bedroom, Sarah handed me a letter. "I wrote this the day after you saw me with David. I never had the courage to give it to you." The letter was tear-stained, a raw confession of regret and shame, but also an analysis of how our marriage had died by inches long before her affair. It was painful to read, but also healing, a level of honesty we'd never achieved before. "I don't want you to read this and go backward," she said nervously. "I just want you to know that I understood what I'd done, even then." I folded the letter carefully and put it in my bedside drawer. It's part of our story now, not the whole story, but a part. Epilogue. 3 years after the night I discovered Sarah's affair, we renewed our vows in a small ceremony in our backyard. Emma, now 15 and dramatically rolling her eyes at our mushiness, played the piano. Max, gray around the muzzle now, served as ring bearer. Our vows were different this time. No promises of perfection or happily ever afters, but commitments to honesty, presence, and the daily work of choosing each other. Sometimes people ask how we did it, how we found our way back from betrayal to love. The answer isn't simple. It took time, therapy, and a willingness to see our whole truth, painful as it was. Not every broken marriage can or should be rebuilt, but ours somehow found a second chance. The affair will always be part of our history, a scar that marks us both. But scars aren't just about damage, they're about healing too. Our relationship now is deeper, more authentic than the one that broke apart. We don't take each other for granted anymore. We know what we almost lost forever. Emma heads to college next year. Sarah and I are talking about traveling, seeing the places we always put off visiting. There's a gentleness between us now, a hard-won wisdom about how fragile even the strongest bonds can be. Last week I found Sarah looking at our wedding photos. Not from the original ceremony, but from the renewal. "What are you thinking?" I asked, sitting beside her. "That sometimes the most unexpected turn in the road leads you exactly where you're supposed to be," she said, leaning against my shoulder. "Not despite the detour, but because of it." I put my arm around her, feeling the weight of our history and the lightness of our future. "I wouldn't recommend our path to anyone," I said with a small smile. "But I'm grateful we found our way back." We sat there together as evening fell, not perfect people and not a perfect marriage, but real and present and choosing each other day after complicated day. The end.